They laughed at Earth, until they realized humans lived there. The stars stretched across the vast expanse of space, and in the midst of the endless black, the Xandorian fleet approached Earth with a sense of confident superiority. The Xandorians were an advanced alien race, their technology far beyond anything Earth had ever seen. They had conquered countless worlds, bringing countless civilizations to their knees. Earth, a small, relatively primitive planet, seemed like an insignificant speck in the grand scheme of the universe. The Xandorians had long since dismissed it, and their first impression was that humans were just another weak species. As their ships entered Earth's atmosphere, the Xandorians marveled at the planet's beauty. The vast oceans, the endless forests, the towering mountains. It was a planet of raw, untapped potential. However, it was also a planet filled with primitive beings, unworthy of their attention. To the Xandorians, humans seemed like nothing more than a curiosity, a species that would crumble beneath the might of their superior technology. They laughed at the idea that such an insignificant race could ever pose a threat to them. The Xandorians' invasion began with the usual arrogance. They sent their advanced warships to the major cities of Earth, prepared to wipe out any form of resistance. Their weapons were powerful beyond belief, capable of leveling entire cities with a single blast. They knew Earth's military was far behind their own in technology, and they expected the battle to be over within hours. The Xandorians watched with amusement as the humans scrambled in defense, their weapons ineffective against the alien ships. But as the battle unfolded, something unexpected began to happen. The humans didn't break as the Xandorians had expected. Instead, they fought back with an unexpected ferocity. Their resistance was not one of overwhelming firepower, but of determination. In the face of advanced alien technology, humanity relied on ingenuity, speed, and a refusal to give up. Sergeant Caleb Matthews, a soldier from the United States Army, was one of the first humans to encounter the Xandorians. As the invasion began, Caleb and his squad were sent to a nearby military base to set up a defensive perimeter. They knew they were outmatched, but they also knew they had to hold their ground for as long as possible. Caleb's squad was small, just a handful of soldiers against an army of invaders, but they were prepared to fight for their homes. The Xandorians initially underestimated Caleb and his squad. Their weapons were no match for the alien forces, but Caleb and his team had something the Xandorians didn't count on: an unwavering will to survive. They set up traps, used their knowledge of the terrain, and worked together as a team, making it impossible for the Xandorians to advance without encountering heavy resistance. As alien soldiers advanced toward their position, Caleb and his team ambushed them with surprising effectiveness. Explosives and makeshift weapons were used to bring down the superior alien forces. While the Xandorians might have had the firepower, the humans had something else: a deep, unyielding determination to protect their world. They had been underestimated, yes, but they were not going to let Earth fall without a fight. Caleb knew the battle was far from over, and he wasn't about to back down. As more and more soldiers joined the fray, the humans began to organize a resistance movement, a rebellion that would make the Xandorians rethink their assumption that Earth was an easy conquest. The Xandorians, however, were confident that their technology and numbers would eventually win out. They didn't understand the humans' capacity for survival. They had seen species fall before, and they thought humanity would be no different. But as they pushed deeper into the cities, they began to see the cracks in their assumption. The humans, though outmatched, had a strange resilience. The soldiers fought without fear, and civilians joined the fight wherever they could. Humanity was not as fragile as the Xandorians had thought. Caleb, though just a single soldier, became a symbol of that resilience. His squad continued to lead attacks against the alien forces, sabotaging their equipment and striking where they least expected. Every victory, no matter how small, spread across Earth like wildfire, and the Xandorians found themselves facing more resistance than they had ever imagined. As the first day of the invasion ended, the Xandorians regrouped and began to realize something: Earth was not going to fall easily. This was not a planet of helpless beings who would simply surrender to their might. The humans fought with a passion and fire that the Xandorians had never encountered. This was a planet that had been underestimated, and now it was clear that the Xandorians would have to adjust their strategy. By the end of the first day, the Xandorians had suffered unexpected losses. Their warships had taken damage, and their soldiers had been killed in skirmishes that were supposed to be easy victories. They were stunned by the effectiveness of the human resistance, and the initial laughter that had filled their ranks began to fade. The alien invaders had expected to crush Earth without breaking a sweat, but now they were beginning to realize that the humans were not the weaklings they had assumed them to be. The Xandorians, still confident in their overwhelming advantage, decided to send reinforcements. They were determined to wipe out the resistance and continue their conquest, but Caleb knew that the humans had only just begun. The battle was far from over. And though they were fighting against an enemy with far superior technology, they had something just as powerful on their side: their unwavering will to fight for their planet. The humans' first major victory came when Caleb and his squad launched a surprise attack on one of the alien supply lines, using the knowledge they had gathered about the enemy's movements. They struck with precision, disabling alien weapons and capturing valuable resources that were used against the invaders. It was a small victory, but it was a victory nonetheless. And for Caleb and his fellow soldiers, it was proof that Earth had more fight in it than the Xandorians had ever imagined. By the end of the day, the Xandorians were no longer laughing. Earth was no longer an insignificant planet in the eyes of the invaders. It was a world worth conquering, yes, but also a world that would not be taken easily. The humans had shown that they could fight, and the Xandorians now knew that they were dealing with something far more dangerous than they had anticipated. As Caleb watched the stars above, he realized that this was only the beginning. The fight for Earth had only just started, and humanity was ready to show the universe that they would never back down. They might have laughed at Earth at first, but soon they would learn what it truly meant to face the strength of humanity. The sun had barely risen, but the air was already thick with the smell of smoke. The battlefield was not what the Xandorians had expected. The city of New York, once a symbol of human achievement, now lay in ruins. But amidst the destruction, humanity's spirit had not faltered. Soldiers, civilians, and engineers all joined together, fiercely determined to defend their home. The Xandorians, on the other hand, looked down on the city from their advanced warships, still convinced that their superior technology would crush the humans in an instant. Sergeant Caleb Matthews stood with his squad in the ruins of what had once been a bustling city block. They had been fighting for hours, their ammunition running low, but Caleb's resolve was stronger than ever. It was clear that Earth's resistance was taking the Xandorians by surprise. They had underestimated the humans' ability to adapt. As the sky above darkened with alien ships descending, Caleb couldn't help but feel a spark of hope. Maybe, just maybe, they could hold out long enough to make a difference. In the heart of the city, the Xandorian commanders were already planning their next move. Their invasion had been stalled by unexpected human resistance, and the loss of several supply lines and warships was a blow they had not anticipated. They had initially sent in their foot soldiers, advanced drones, and heavily armed alien warriors to crush the human resistance. But the humans were fighting in ways the Xandorians did not understand. Guerrilla tactics, surprise attacks, and human ingenuity were causing chaos in their ranks. A fleet of Xandorian warships hovered above the battlefield. These ships were enormous, each one capable of obliterating entire cities with a single strike. The alien race's superiority was built on the sheer might of their technology, but they had made one critical mistake. They had underestimated Earth's will to survive. Caleb and his team had been part of a series of skirmishes where they had managed to outmaneuver the Xandorians, using the city's infrastructure to their advantage. But now, the aliens were going for broke. The Xandorian fleet was preparing for a full-scale assault, and this time they wouldn't hold back. Their next strike would be aimed directly at the heart of the human resistance. The Xandorians had learned from their earlier mistakes. They knew that they could not simply crush the humans with overwhelming force. It was time to use their most advanced weapon, an energy beam capable of turning an entire city into ashes. The Xandorians, commanders, believed that this final strike would finally break the human spirit. But as they prepared to unleash their devastating weapon, Caleb and his team were ready. They had learned that the Xandorians relied heavily on their fleet's command center to coordinate their attacks. If they could destroy the command center, they might have a chance to turn the tide. Caleb's team had been working with a group of engineers who had spent hours devising a plan to infiltrate the Xandorian fleet's command center. It was a risky move, almost suicidal, but it was humanity's best shot. With the sun now hidden behind the thick clouds of smoke, Caleb and his squad made their way toward the city's edge, where the alien ships had begun to gather. They moved quickly, blending into the shadows of the ruined buildings, careful not to alert the Xandorians to their presence. The tension in the air was palpable. Each step they took a reminder of what was at stake. If they failed, humanity's last hope would be lost. As they neared the Xandorian command center, Caleb couldn't help but notice the stark contrast between the alien ships and the humans who fought against them. The Xandorians were powerful, but their arrogance was their greatest weakness. They assumed their technology made them invincible, that their advanced weapons would crush any opponent. But the humans had something the aliens didn't, an unyielding will to protect their world. Caleb's thoughts were interrupted as they reached the outer perimeter of the command center. He signaled his squad to stop. They were close. The alien forces were scattered throughout the area, but the Xandorian leadership remained inside the heavily guarded facility. Caleb knew this was the moment. It would be all or nothing. Without a word, Caleb and his team began their assault. They moved quickly, using the cover of night and the remnants of the city to shield their movements. The first few Xandorian soldiers they encountered were taken by surprise. Caleb's squad was small but skilled. They had fought in some of the most dangerous conflict zones on Earth, and now they were up against an enemy unlike any they had ever faced. But their training and instincts kicked in. They moved as one, neutralizing the alien soldiers before they had a chance to react. Inside the command center, the Xandorian leadership was unaware of the imminent threat. Their attention was focused on the final preparations for their devastating attack on the human resistance. Caleb's team moved swiftly, disabling the alien security systems that guarded the building's entrances. One by one, they took down the guards outside, ensuring that no alarm was raised. Finally, they reached the heart of the command center. It was here that the Xandorian fleet's control was centralized. Everything from their weapon systems to their communication lines ran through this facility. Caleb knew that destroying this building would cripple the alien forces, but getting inside wouldn't be easy. The walls were reinforced with alien technology, and the building was heavily guarded. Caleb made a quick decision. He ordered his team to set explosives around the building's foundation, placing them in key areas that would cause the most damage. As they worked quickly, Caleb's mind raced. If they succeeded, the Xandorian fleet would be in disarray, but if they failed, it would be the end of humanity's resistance. The countdown began. They had only a few minutes left before the explosives were set to go off. Caleb's heart raced. He could feel the weight of the world on his shoulders. The Xandorians were more than just invaders. They were an existential threat to everything humanity stood for. But they weren't going to take Earth without a fight. As the explosives finally detonated, the building shook. A powerful explosion ripped through the facility, sending debris flying into the air. The Xandorian command center crumbled, and the alien forces were thrown into chaos. Caleb and his team quickly retreated, knowing that they had completed their mission. But as they ran back through the streets, they could hear the roar of the Xandorian fleet above. The aliens had been dealt a blow, but the war was far from over. In the days that followed, the Xandorians began to realize that humanity wasn't just a primitive species to be crushed. They had fought back with every ounce of strength they had. Their superior technology had been turned against them, and their most powerful weapon had been neutralized. The humans had proven something the Xandorians had not expected. They were capable of fighting back, even when the odds were stacked against them. Caleb knew that this was just the beginning. The battle for Earth had only begun, but one thing was certain. Humanity had the strength to fight for their survival. They had proven to the Xandorians that they were not to be underestimated. And now the war would truly begin. The skies above Earth were no longer filled with the laughter of the Xandorians. The once overwhelming alien fleet now seemed less confident, more cautious, as if the humans had managed to sow a seed of doubt in their minds. After the destruction of their command center, the Xandorians had lost their ability to control their fleet, and chaos reigned among their ranks. Yet, despite this, the aliens continued to press their assault. They knew they could not allow a small planet like Earth to stand in their way. It was time to go all in, to destroy the last vestiges of human resistance. The ground forces, once so sure of their superiority, now faced a different kind of enemy. Caleb Matthews and his team, though just a handful of soldiers, had proven that humans could do more than simply survive. They could outthink and outmaneuver their alien invaders. Caleb's squad had completed their mission, but he knew it wasn't enough. The fight had only just begun. As the Zandorian fleet regrouped, they prepared to use their most powerful weapon, an enormous energy cannon capable of erasing entire cities from existence. They had used it once in an earlier strike, but this time, they planned to level Earth's largest cities, leaving no place for humans to hide. The weapon, however, was not simple to operate. It required a vast amount of energy and precise coordination, and the aliens were still reeling from the chaos Caleb and his squad had caused. Meanwhile, on the ground, the human resistance had grown. News of the Zandorian defeat had spread quickly, and more people had joined the fight. Civilians, scientists, and soldiers alike were working together to build a more organized defense. While the Zandorians had advanced technology, the humans had something just as powerful: resilience and the ability to adapt quickly. Caleb and his team were working side by side with Earth's best engineers, hackers, and strategists to level the playing field. It was here that Caleb's next surprise for the Zandorians was born. Unknown to the alien invaders, humans had been working on a hidden project, a covert operation that had been set up long before the invasion began. It wasn't just a weapon of brute force, it was a weapon of intelligence. A group of the world's best engineers and scientists had created a system that could adapt to any enemy technology, mimicking it, and even surpassing it in some areas. The project was called the Echo Protocol, and it was humanity's secret weapon. The Echo Protocol had been under development for years, and while the Zandorians believed that their technology was untouchable, humanity had quietly been developing systems capable of countering and defeating even the most advanced alien weapons. It was a technology that, when combined with the human spirit of survival, could change the course of the war. But it wasn't just the technology that was changing. Caleb was changing, too. In the heat of battle, after surviving so many close calls, he began to notice something in himself that hadn't been there before. His body, once ordinary, had started to adapt to the stress of battle. He felt stronger, faster, more aware of his surroundings. The enhancements that the Zandorians had used to heal him had triggered something in his own biology, a kind of rapid adaptation. His reflexes were sharper, and his thinking was clearer. He had become a living symbol of human potential. He wasn't just fighting to survive anymore, he was fighting to win. As Caleb trained with the resistance forces, he began to understand just how far humanity's reach could extend. They weren't limited by their technology alone. They were limited only by their imagination. The humans could adapt, learn, and improve faster than the Zandorians had ever expected. And the more Caleb learned, the more he understood that this wasn't just a war for Earth's survival. This was a war that could change the balance of power in the entire galaxy. In a small underground base, Caleb met with a team of engineers who were working tirelessly to complete the final phase of the Echo Protocol. They had intercepted communications from the Zandorian fleet, revealing the location of their energy cannon. The Resistance had one shot at this. The cannon's energy core was located in a heavily fortified complex, and it would take a carefully coordinated strike to disable it. Caleb knew the risks, but he also knew they couldn't afford to wait any longer. If the Zandorians unleashed the weapon again, Earth would be finished. The plan was simple but dangerous. Caleb and his team would infiltrate the complex, disable the cannon's power source, and make sure the Zandorians couldn't use it again. The humans didn't have the advanced weapons the Zandorians had, but they had something the aliens couldn't predict: their determination. As the team prepared for the mission, Caleb stood in front of them, feeling the weight of their trust on his shoulders. He wasn't just leading a group of soldiers, he was leading a movement. The fate of Earth rested on their success. They would infiltrate the complex, strike quickly, and leave before the Zandorians could react. It was their only chance. The Zandorians, still recovering from their earlier defeat, had no idea that Caleb and his team were closing in on their most important asset. They were too focused on the deployment of their weapon to notice the growing human resistance. They believed the humans were already on the brink of defeat, that their victory was inevitable. But Caleb knew better. He knew that the humans had the power to outlast the Xandorians. They had something the aliens didn't, heart. The mission began at dusk. Caleb's team moved silently through the shadows, their movements swift and deliberate. They avoided the Xandorian patrols, slipping past their defenses with ease. The Echo Protocol had helped them decode the aliens' systems, allowing them to access restricted areas without detection. Every step took them closer to their goal, and every step reminded Caleb of the stakes. This wasn't just about stopping a weapon. It was about showing the Xandorians that they had underestimated humanity, and that Earth was worth fighting for. As they reached the core of the facility, Caleb and his team planted the explosives that would disable the cannon's power source. The seconds seemed to stretch as they prepared to leave, but then an alarm blared. The Xandorians had detected them. Caleb's heart raced as he signaled his team to fall back. The mission had just become a race against time. They had to get out of there before the entire complex went up in flames. The explosions rang out as the power core went dark, and the Xandorian fleet's energy cannon went offline. The blast was massive, but Caleb and his team had already made their way to the extraction point. The Xandorians were furious, but it was too late. The humans had struck again. Back in the heart of the human resistance, news of the mission spread like wildfire. The energy cannon was destroyed, and the Xandorians had been dealt another blow. The humans weren't just surviving anymore. They were fighting back with everything they had. And as Caleb looked out over the horizon, watching the stars that had once seemed so distant, he knew one thing for sure: humanity was no longer the underdog. They were a force to be reckoned with. The Xandorians, now aware of just how dangerous the humans could be, began to rethink their strategy. But it was already too late. Earth had shown that it would not go down without a fight. The war had just shifted in humanity's favor, and the Xandorians now knew that the humans were not to be underestimated. The days after the destruction of the energy cannon were filled with a quiet kind of optimism that humanity had never felt before. The Xandorian fleet, reeling from the loss of their most powerful weapon, had pulled back. The war had taken a turn. The Xandorians, known throughout the galaxy for their ruthlessness and overwhelming technology, had met resistance unlike any they had encountered before. They were beginning to realize that Earth, with all its perceived weaknesses, was far from the simple conquest they had imagined. But as Caleb Matthews stood with his team at the front lines, he knew that the battle wasn't won yet. The Xandorians had been knocked back, yes, but they were still formidable, and their pride had been wounded. Caleb had heard rumors of a new weapon they were developing, one far more dangerous than anything they had used before. He wasn't sure what it was, but he knew it would be coming, and when it did, Earth would need to be ready. The days blurred together as the human resistance regrouped, patched up its wounds, and prepared for the inevitable next strike. Caleb spent long hours strategizing with military leaders, engineers, and resistance fighters. They knew they had to act fast before the Xandorians could regroup and come back with a vengeance. The Xandorian fleet had retreated to a distant moon, and for a brief time there was an uneasy silence. But Caleb couldn't shake the feeling that something big was coming. He could see it in the eyes of his fellow soldiers. Everyone was bracing for what came next. The Xandorians wouldn't stay down for long. Then a message came in. The Xandorians were not just regrouping, they were preparing for a full-scale invasion. Their new weapon, a massive orbital strike system capable of devastating entire continents, was almost ready. The alien forces had learned from their past mistakes. They were no longer underestimating humanity. They had decided to take no chances this time. The orbital strike would wipe out the human resistance in one fell swoop. Caleb knew this was their most dangerous moment. The Earth's defenses had been built on the assumption that the Xandorians would eventually retreat. But now, with this new weapon, the humans had to fight harder than ever before. There was no choice now but to strike first. The Xandorians had underestimated the humans once, but this time they had to make sure it didn't happen again. In a secret underground bunker, Caleb and the leaders of the human resistance gathered. The room was filled with the quiet hum of computers and the rustling of papers, but there was no mistaking the tension in the air. This was it. If they failed here, the Earth would fall. They would lose everything. "This is our last chance," Caleb said, his voice steady but filled with an urgency he could not hide. The Zandorians are preparing to launch. We know where their orbital strike system is, and we know they won't hesitate to use it. If we don't stop it now, Earth's future is over. The room fell silent. Everyone understood the stakes. This wasn't just about survival anymore. It was about ensuring that humanity would have a future. "We've developed a plan," one of the engineers, a sharp-eyed woman named Rebecca, said. "We can infiltrate their main facility, but it won't be easy. We'll need to bypass their security, disable their launch systems, and do it all before they even know we're there." Caleb nodded. He had been part of enough risky operations to know that this plan would be the most dangerous thing they had ever attempted. But there was no other choice. The Zandorians had already shown that they would stop at nothing to conquer Earth. This time, humanity had to strike back in full force. The plan was set into motion. Caleb and his squad would infiltrate the Zandorian base, locate the orbital strike system, and destroy it before it could be used. But there were no guarantees. This wasn't like the earlier missions. This time, they were going up against the full might of the Zandorian war machine. As Caleb suited up and prepared for the mission, he thought about how far humanity had come. They had gone from being the underdogs to standing toe-to-toe with one of the most powerful alien races in the galaxy. He had seen what humans were capable of: resilience, creativity, and the determination to fight for their home, no matter the odds. And now he was about to lead them into the heart of the Zandorian war machine. The squad moved quickly through the ruined city streets, their boots pounding against the cracked pavement. The Zandorians had pulled back, but their presence was still felt everywhere. Alien drones flew overhead, scanning for any signs of human activity. Caleb's team used the cover of night to slip past their patrols, staying in the shadows. Every move was calculated. Every decision could mean life or death. As they reached the outskirts of the Zandorian base, Caleb's heart pounded in his chest. This was it, the moment that could decide the fate of the entire planet. They had to move quickly, and they had to be smart. If they were discovered, it would be over before they even had a chance to strike. The entrance to the base was guarded by a massive Zandorian force: drones, alien soldiers, and automated defense systems. But Caleb wasn't intimidated. He had faced worse odds before. The squad used a series of distractions, explosions, and interference devices to create chaos and slip inside the base undetected. Once inside, the real work began. They split into teams, each tasked with a specific objective. Caleb's team would disable the security systems and locate the orbital strike control center. Other teams would plant explosives around the facility to make sure there was no chance of the Zandorians regrouping afterward. As they made their way deeper into the facility, the tension was palpable. Every turn could bring them face to face with a Zandorian patrol, but they kept moving forward, each step taking them closer to their goal. They were in enemy territory now, and there was no turning back. At the heart of the base, they found it, the Orbital Strike Control Center. It was heavily guarded, but Caleb and his team had anticipated this. They launched a surprise assault, catching the alien forces off guard. The firefight was intense, but humanity had the advantage of unpredictability. The Zandorians were used to dominating through sheer force, but humans fought with ingenuity. They fought with purpose. The battle raged on, but after what felt like an eternity, Caleb and his team finally reached the control room. With a few well-placed strikes, they disabled the security systems and began planting explosives. The countdown was on. As Caleb looked around the control room, he realized something. The Zandorians might have had the power, but humanity had the heart. They had the determination to keep going, no matter the odds, and that made all the difference. The explosives were set, and the countdown began. Caleb signaled his team to retreat. The Zandorians would soon realize what had happened, but by then, it would be too late. As the team made their way back to the extraction point, Caleb couldn't help but feel a sense of accomplishment. They had struck at the heart of the Zandorian war machine, and they had succeeded. The orbital strike system was destroyed, and with it, the Zandorians' hope of conquering Earth. The Zandorians, now realizing that their invasion had been truly defeated, were left with nothing but their pride. They had learned the hard way that humanity was not to be underestimated, and that, for Caleb and his squad, was the greatest victory of all. As they left the Zandorian base behind, Caleb looked out over the horizon. The fight wasn't over, but humanity had proven something. They had proven that they could stand up against the most powerful forces in the galaxy, and they had won. The day the Xandorians retreated was a day unlike any other. The Earth, battered and bruised, stood tall as the invaders finally realized what humans were capable of. They had underestimated them at every turn, dismissing them as a primitive species, only to find out that humanity was much more than that. The war had taken its toll, but it had also given birth to a new spirit among the people of Earth. Caleb Matthews stood in front of the newly established Resistance headquarters, looking out over the city below. The destruction was visible: burned buildings, shattered streets, and the remains of alien technology littering the landscape. But amidst it all, there was hope. The humans had fought and they had won. They had taken on a force far more advanced than they were, and through their determination, they had triumphed. The Xandorians, their fleet shattered and their command structure in disarray, had finally accepted defeat. The remaining forces, once so sure of their victory, had been scattered. The Queen of the Xandorians, having seen the full strength of humanity's resolve, had been forced to retreat, acknowledging that Earth was not theirs to conquer. Caleb knew this victory would change everything. It was not just about defeating the Xandorians, it was about proving to the galaxy that humanity was not to be underestimated. Earth was no longer a backwater planet. It was a force that could stand toe-to-toe with the most powerful civilizations in the universe. As the humans celebrated their hard-won freedom, Caleb couldn't help but reflect on the journey that had brought them here. He thought about the early days of the invasion, when the Xandorians had laughed at Earth, convinced that they could wipe out humanity with little effort. But over time, the humans had shown the Xandorians that they were wrong. It had started with small victories, ambushes, sabotage, and guerrilla tactics, but as the resistance grew stronger, so did their resolve. Every time the Xandorians thought they had broken the humans came back stronger. Now, with the war officially over, the people of Earth were rebuilding. But this time, they weren't just rebuilding their cities, they were rebuilding their place in the galaxy. The defeat of the Xandorians had shown the universe that humanity was a force to be reckoned with. Caleb and the rest of the Resistance knew they couldn't just return to their old lives. Earth had earned its spot among the stars, and now it was time to look to the future. A new era had begun. Caleb and his team were called to a meeting with the leaders of the newly formed Earth Council. The council, made up of representatives from every nation and the leaders of the Resistance, had been formed to oversee Earth's recovery and future interactions with other civilizations. Caleb wasn't sure what his role would be now. He had fought hard to get to this point, but he had never imagined that he would be asked to help lead Earth's future. But as he walked into the council chambers, he could feel the weight of the responsibility on his shoulders. "Sergeant Matthews," said the council leader, a woman named Laura, who had been one of the Resistance's key figures in the war. "We have come to a decision. You and your team have been instrumental in defeating the Xandorians and protecting this world. You have proven yourselves to be not just survivors, but heroes." Caleb listened, feeling a mix of pride and humility. The victory had never been just about him or his team. It had been about the entire human race coming together to protect their home. "We believe," Laura continued, "that humanity's future lies not just in defending Earth, but in becoming part of the greater galactic community. The Xandorians may be gone, but there are other races out there, and we must be prepared to face them. You have shown us what humans are capable of. It's time for us to take our place among the stars." Caleb nodded. He knew the journey wasn't over. The war with the Xandorians had been won, but there was a bigger universe out there, full of unknown challenges. Humanity's place in that universe was still uncertain, but one thing was clear: they had earned their right to be there. "We are offering you and your team the opportunity to lead the charge in humanity's first interstellar mission," Laura said. "You will not only help secure Earth's future, but you will also represent the strength of humanity as we venture out into the cosmos." The weight of the offer hung in the air. Caleb had never imagined that one day he would be asked to help lead humanity into a new era of exploration. The thought of it was both exciting and daunting, but one thing was clear: he couldn't turn down the opportunity to shape the future. "Thank you," Caleb said, his voice steady. "It's an honor to be asked, but this victory didn't come from just one person. It came from all of us. From every soldier, every scientist, every civilian who fought to protect this planet. And together we will face whatever comes next. For Earth, for humanity, the Council nodded, recognizing the truth in his words. Earth had won its freedom through the combined effort of everyone, and it would take that same unity to face the future. The days that followed were filled with preparations. Caleb and his team worked with the best minds Earth had to offer, developing the technologies needed to send humanity into the stars. They had been given the tools to continue the fight, but now they were working on a new mission: exploration, diplomacy, and defense in a galaxy full of unknowns. As Caleb walked through the newly reconstructed streets of Earth's capital, he could see the changes taking place. People were rebuilding their homes, but they were also rebuilding their spirit. Earth had been through so much, but it had emerged stronger than ever. The damage from the war was still visible, but the signs of renewal were everywhere. The world was healing, and humanity was no longer just surviving. They were thriving. And as Caleb looked up at the stars, he knew that this was only the beginning. The galaxy was vast, and the challenges ahead were uncertain. But humanity was no longer the underdog. They had earned their place among the stars. The Xandorians had learned that Earth was not a planet to be dismissed, and soon the rest of the galaxy would know that, too. Humanity had fought for their freedom, for their home, and for their future. And now, with that future in their hands, they were ready for whatever came next. Caleb's journey was far from over, but as he looked out over the city, he knew one thing: humanity had proven itself. Earth was no longer a forgotten planet in the galaxy. It was a force to be reckoned with, and as long as there were humans left to fight, they would never back down.